We are back with our panel on opportunities and challenges in hair care. For everyone that is on Discord, I'm putting the stream up live now, and it should be live for everyone everywhere. So we're streaming on two platforms here. Thank you so much to our panelists for agreeing to participate in our summit. Crystal and Trevor already gave presentations. Helene couldn't join us at the start of the day, but I'm so glad you were able to join us here for this panel. And all of the speakers here have already been introduced. I only have a few questions so that I have lots of time for audience questions, because I know you guys have a lot of questions for our panelists. But I'll just get started with the topic of this presentation is going to be on challenges and opportunities for hair care. So maybe the challenges point would be a good place to start. So from each of your vantages, what do you think are some of the challenges that we face in the hair care space? And since you haven't made an appearance just yet, Helene, do you want to kick off the answer for this?
Yeah, so do you like from an industry perspective, I would say, well, the main thing is what we do all the time is, well, probably like damaging our hair, and it's very difficult to repair damaged hair. So I would say here, yeah, it's always the challenge to repair damaged hair, and there are some nice techniques already. And I think, well, we are always striving and looking for better techniques. So I think mainly in repairing damaged hair, and then maybe also like in such a sense informing first of all, because it's better to prevent it than to repair afterwards, to inform the consumer about how we can prevent damaging our hair actually.
Trevor, would you like to chime in next?
I think gotta be careful here when I say politically correct things or not. I think the challenge is perhaps the way the industry runs. I mean, we've talked a lot about consumer misperceptions and how we tend to, run with the things consumers say, which often are not the correct diagnosis. But then marketing people run away and tell R&D, we have to develop products that do this. And, we've heard about how certain ingredients get a bad rap and we're not allowed to use them. So, I've worked in this industry for 32 years, and I really wouldn't want to say that products are that better today than when I started. We've took out a bunch of ingredients that became unpopular, but I don't think we've moved the needle at all. So, I think until we decide it's science that's going to take this forward rather than what the consumer says, I'm not sure we can make scientifically better products.
Crystal, what do you think?
Yeah. So my perspective is based on feedback that I've gotten from others, and that is the challenge is communicating the science behind the claims in a way that's different and evolves from what we do right now, which is putting a pretty picture on a bottle and trying to convince someone that something is working based on all this science that's been going on without data to substantiate it. And so how can we articulate the data to back up all of the claims and bring the consumer up to a point where they can understand it? And I've had conversations with our peers and talking about, oh, the consumer doesn't need to know this information. They just care about the end result. And while sometimes that's true, I think we have a more sophisticated consumer now. So I think we need to evolve what we do to actually speak to the consumer who wants more knowledge.
And I suppose this kind of goes along the lines of where we started the day with our presentations on myths and misconceptions and how consumer sentiment drives the industry. And the industry has been teaching consumers based off of the marketing that we've been using. We use free from fear-mongering claims. Well, now consumers think that these ingredients of the products that are free, they're free from it, are bad, and therefore they should be opting for these other ingredients. They're better for us, they're better for our hair. These other ingredients are causing our hair to fall out, or whatever consumers believe. So of course, this is what consumers think when this is the information that they've been exposed to. So kind of along these lines, we had a really interesting question from Annika. So now that you all are maybe more in contact or aware of the misinformation on social media, what beliefs have surprised you guys most? And is there a difference in what the industry internally is puzzled by versus what the general public is puzzled about? Crystal, do you want to maybe kick this one off?
I'm trying to think about what would be a surprising one. There are just so many. I'm going to give Trevor his flowers and say that one of the things that he mentioned that I think is just really surprising is how people think that they can use a product and just automatically have better hair. And I think Ian Salas, he did one of your podcasts. No, he did a podcast recently. And he was talking about, he gave the analogy of fabrics, how you can say, okay, I want to preserve this particular fabric and I'm going to put it in the washing machine and it's going to come out like new. And you can't just with regular maintenance and cleansing or conditioning or adding fabric softeners, you just can't have that repair. So I think people thinking that these products are going to magically do something and they believe it without having data, that is something that's really surprising to me.
And Crystal, actually, if I can ask, like, what do you think then? Because sometimes the nice thing about a hair care product, like for example, a conditioner, that of course it cannot get back to the state it was like before you damaged it. But sometimes the nice thing about a hair care product is that it does give, compared to, for example, skincare, it can give an immediate result. Or like, how do you see that?
Well, so it depends on what's going on. And Trevor spoke about this as well. Looking at how you can condition the hair. Of course, when you're starting from a new slate and your hair is in a condition where it feels bad, and then you cleanse it, and especially from the perspective of curly hair, then you're resetting everything. The hair is more pliable. But then as time goes on, it can go back to where it was, depending upon the environment in which that is in. So that is my perspective from that standpoint. You can use a conditioner, but depending upon the insults that you put up on it, it can change.
Yeah, I guess, if I can have my 2 cents, I really believe that products work really well. As I said, shampoos are supposed to clean your hair. That's what they do. Most shampoos clean your hair spectacularly well. Conditioners are supposed to make your hair feel good. Most conditioners do that really, really well. But because all shampoos and all conditioners do that, we need new stories. And that's where some of these marketing messages come along about, repair and this, that, and the other. And everywhere gets a bit murky. So I mentioned mine. We never say this dishwashing detergent cleans my plates but doesn't mend them. It's not supposed to mend them. It's supposed to clean them. And shampoos are the same thing with hair, basically. And the other one, which we mentioned and has been mentioned a few times during this, is also this whole idea that products are not safe for you. In this litigious world we live in the US, do you really think a big company would sell a product that has the potential to do harm to people? There's immense amounts of testing that's done to make sure that these products are safe to go into the market, at least with what we know to date. So I think those are probably the 2 things that sort of surprise me.
And Trevor, here actually what you just mentioned about, well, that all shampoos are able to cleanse well, but and that we should look for more, then improved shampoos or which are different. But interestingly, there are also sometimes shampoos coming on the market which don't cleanse as well, which are, for example, saying, surfactant free. And then I always wonder, okay, if you're going to sell this, and some people really need a good cleanser, like a surfactant which is able to cleanse their hair. So that's also sometimes a downside, that there come brands are upcoming which don't even include a surfactant and then selling it as a shampoo. And so, yeah, we are looking for then better, but sometimes the downside is now also that sometimes brands are coming up which don't sell then, a shampoo which is able to clean our scalp, actually.
Yeah, we've all seen chemical free, right? That's the one that makes us all chuckle the most.
Or surfactant free.
There's there's real science behind these products work. Shampoos work because you use surfactants to create micelles. You can use a whole bunch of different surfactants, but you still have to create micelles. Without micelles, you don't get any cleansing. So it's a very simple science, which sometimes we just want to take to very complicated levels and start talking about repair and all sorts of other things. So I think what's fairly simple often gets really, really turned into something that is perceived to be difficult and muddies the waters.
Helene, I don't know if you want to add anything before I move to my. You've already added a few bits, but I'll give you a chance now to add a little bit more if you would
Well, I
like
think
to.
one thing which is still interesting, and I've posted a lot about this on Instagram, and I don't know, or it's that in the end, for the consumer, this misconception about hydrating hair, actually, like that is one of the things which is often put on a packaging that hydrates and condition, or well, it hydrates or adds moisture to the hair. Well, this is like, I think, a big misconception that the whole thing that those conditioning ingredients, I mean, they are just conditioning agents actually, which form like a film around the hair, which are then sold as a hydrating ingredient. Yeah, so that's something which we say, or that can mislead the consumer actually about what the ingredient really does, which then gives the perception that indeed it's good to add like moisturizing agents to the hair. Well, in the end, it's like conditioning agents which are doing the job actually, but we sort of translate it as moisturizing, hydrating ingredients. So yeah, is that something we should change, or does it matter that it's written like that on the label? I don't know what Trevor and Crystal think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's well known down to the relative humidity, and it's not something that's readily changed by products, but it's what consumers say, and so marketers say it back to try and sell products, and it becomes this vicious cycle. So they're saying it because consumers say they want it, basically, but again, it's one of those things that technically isn't correct.
I agree.
I suppose if there's one major takeaway of this whole summit, we've said this all throughout the day. Hydration is not what you want in your hair at the end of the day. It's just not. It's just not.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
Well, at the end of the
depends.
day, past that initial phase, and you express, okay, please correct me, Crystal. I'm so sorry. Please correct me.
No, I mean, hydration could be what you want if you want your hair to be plasticized, but you have to just be aware. So you just have to have that asterisk on there to say, be careful when it's wet, because some hair is more manageable when it's wet. That is a fact.
But then after it's dry, would you say that you want hydration in your hair?
After it's dry, you may want hydration for the feel, because if you want softer looking hair, yes, but know the consequences.
Okay, so some nuance to this comment. So
There
I'm
is.
sorry for my unnuanced statement. Okay, so now moving on. So we've talked about a lot on misinformation, misconceptions from consumers. Now on the technical side, for things that are actually happening in the industry from like a technical development side, what are the 3 biggest technical challenges in hair science? This is a question that I thought was an interesting spin on what I initially asked from hair care scientists. Trevor, would you like to kick this one off?
I'm still thinking. 3 of them. Wow, I'm still trying to think of one.
Well, I just now, like Jen, if I can think of one, like also to find substitutes for silicones, I think that's a very big challenge here. Because silicones they work so well, and in the end, for some silicones, it's questionable, like what's their impact on the environment, and so it's something we looking for substitutes, and I think there's still a very big challenge in substitutes for silicones there.
Yeah, I think sustainability is a good one. I mean, it is a buzzword, and it's not just marketing; it is for the good of the planet. So, how to do all this stuff without messing up the planet is a good one. And again, we have to be careful about what we just turn into marketing hyperbole versus what is science. But I think certainly we know those stories about palm oil and cutting forests down and all that kind of stuff. It's important stuff. Okay, now I'm thinking for number 2.
Well, what I was thinking about, of course, is in the context of curly hair, but technologically, because there is a need for moisture, or the softening of the hair fiber for ease of manageability. I think being able to achieve that, and I don't know if you can do it without water, but if there are other ingredients that you could use to get that same benefit, that would be beneficial, especially if it's not compromising the integrity of our hair. But one other thing that I think is worthwhile talking about is you have problems with the scalp, a lot of problems with the scalp. And so I think Jennifer Marsh did a great job talking about the dandruff and the different different things that we need to consider to have a healthy scalp. But hair loss is something technologically we need to have better formulations for and to understand it more.
Until indeed, like hair loss is, well, it will always stay challenging, I think. Until then, sometimes it's because it's such a big challenge, it's maybe too bad that people don't focus as well, just strengthening the hair they already have. So yeah, focusing, I mean, we often focus on hair loss, and sometimes, well, we do a lot of stuff to our hair which makes our hair break actually. And well, that's, I always think, like, already focus on, well, strengthening the hair which is still there, because the focus on hair loss is pretty difficult indeed. And yeah.
You know, I think another challenge for our industry, it really is keeping it real right now. You know, back when I started in this world, it was pretty commonplace for the big companies to challenge each other when they thought people were saying some things that were pushing the label a little bit. You know, everybody was jostling for shelf space back then. Now it's a much different world with everybody selling products online, and you know, small companies can start pushing their stuff, you know, through the internet and so forth, and can be successful doing it. But at the same time, they can tell some quite wild stories, and you know, those wild stories get copied by other people and copied by other people, and before you know it, it's almost something that people expect. And so you know, I think we do have to be very careful that our industry doesn't turn into, you know, the Wild West, and we start just you know, snake oil salesmanship and so forth. Our products do this, that, and the other. You know, you know, again, I mentioned in my presentation, be skeptical, seek evidence. You know, don't believe things just because somebody's told you something. Show me the data. If you think you're building bonds and you can make hair stronger, show me the data and I'll believe it.
I second that. Absolutely.
And then moving on, do you think the industry is doing an effective job addressing these challenges? What are we doing and what could we do better? Who wants to kick this one off? Feline?
Well, I think that's difficult, because then you want something. I mean, of course, the industry and brands, they have like a commercial benefit and a financial benefit. So yeah, I would say it's difficult to form like one bond within that, because yeah, I mean, there are also brands who would like to sell their products no matter what they claim or put on their packaging. So yeah, I mean, from a scientist point of view, also, if you don't sell a product, it's easy to give the consumers the right information. But yeah, there are many brands who want to sell their product. So yeah.
I think the challenging thing for the hair industry is, you know, what's a typical bottle of shampoo or conditioner at a mass market in the store? You know, $5 or so. So, you know, to make these breakthroughs, you need to do a good amount of research, and you know, these companies have to recuperate their investments. And so, you know, skincare, where you might spend $30 for a little bottle of something, you know, it can spend more money justifying that research. But in hair care, it's not so easy to justify, and you know, perhaps there isn't as much research going on now as there was in the industry, you know, a couple of decades ago.
So, from what I can see, there is this one brand, and I talk about this brand a lot because I'm really impressed. I'm not going to name the company by name, but I think that there is one company who is doing it right in terms of the model of not trying to do everything themselves, but to leverage the expertise of others in the industry. So, for example, collaborating with dermatologists, making sure that you have feedback from a number of cosmetologists, but really pushing the status or moving the needle from the typical status quo to doing something really quite innovative. And so I'm always talking about collaboration. And I think that there is an example of a company who is doing it right with collaborating and asking others to join in so that they can get a fuller, the breadth of the understanding is better, and they're able to take that and then utilize it for advancing some of the knowledge. So what some people or some companies are doing is good, but others are really lacking. So I would say collaboration is definitely the direction to move in to get things faster, and to also involve other perspectives.
Well, and maybe it's also for like, I mean, there's so many small brands who, put a hair care line on, and it's very difficult to be innovative. I mean, if you have like the most innovative products which came on the market like these last years, there's lots of research behind it, and so you need like to have the capabilities to do that actually. So, if you want to have innovative hair care, I mean, it takes a lot of money and research, and not always like the. You don't think so? That here, Crystal, that here.
I don't know. So I would have believed that when I was, 10 years ago, I probably would think that. But I have gotten a lot of insight from speaking with people who are in the industry who are actually touching hair. And at first you're like, I don't know if I believe that. But then the more you're around it, you see, and you see for yourself that there are some questions that need to be answered. And even though it's anecdotal, it may be something to this. So when you explore what people are already observing, then I think that gives rise to innovation that you may not have been able to see otherwise. So I think me being away from corporate America has opened up my eyes to other opportunities. And it's just a matter of exploring these opportunities that I think a lot of the corporations are missing, because we're used to doing the things the same way we've always done it. So I think that there's a cheaper way to do it. I just don't think that companies are open or even aware of doing it differently.
Yeah, I see your point here, what you mean there, that sometimes indeed to get out of the box or think out of the box here is
Okay, so I had one final question of my own before I only ask questions from the audience. There's lots of questions still. And this was more of a positive question, which is, what are some opportunities that you see for the hair care space? And or maybe you can shift your answer to, what is the future if it's positive? If the future is bleak, then maybe answer the first question. The future of hair care. Who wants to kick this one off? Crystal, do you want to start?
I will. So I am amazed at all of the breakthroughs that are happening in terms of knowledge when it comes to what's going on with the body itself. So the environment, or the impact of the environment or lifestyle on your health, that's out there. And most of it supports what we've always known. Don't drink too much alcohol, don't overindulge in like things like smoking cigarettes. I mean, so all of that is fine. But what is really fascinating is there are those, sometimes you have examples where someone is doing all the wrong things and it's not impacting their health. And so that is, I'm going to turn this to hair, because sometimes people can have all the heat treatments so they can color their hair platinum blonde, use heat processing, and do a number of things, and their hair is able to withstand it. So what is it about that particular individual that makes that hair be able to withstand all of that? So it's looking at the exceptions and trying to understand why these hair fibers are responding or not responding in a particular way, and learning from that perspective and then innovating from there. So it's a little twist, but I think the knowledge that is coming out and the technological advancements and the instruments that are used to detect what's going on, that's getting better. So I think there can be a breakthrough in the understanding, and that will help to fuel innovation.
Yeah, I was going to sort of say the same thing. You know, we are in the information age. We have more information now than we've ever had. It's so easy to get our fingers on it that, you know, you would imagine that if ever we were going to develop new products, now would be the case. And I was just going to say what Crystal said. As a guy who makes his living, you know, taking measurements and doing research, today's equipment can do what we used to do years and years ago, you know, in a few hours versus a few days. So you can generate information that much more quickly now. So all the tools are there. I just think we've got to get our ducks in a row.
And last but not least, Helene, what do you think?
Well, here, I just like what I mentioned with the silicones here, I think like the whole, which might be very challenging for industry. This is not only for hair care or for cosmetics, I think for many other industry, the sustainability challenge to seek for ingredients and products which are more sustainable with the same sensorial perceptions and with the same efficacy actually is, I think, very challenging in, yeah.
Okay, now on to audience questions. You guys sent me some good ones. So I will, this was more of a provocative question again from Annika. Is hair damage really a big deal? Is it worth losing sleep over? Use a conditioner and call it a day? What do you think?
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, you know, if all you do is not change the color of your hair and not heat straighten your hair and not do this, where's the fun in that? You know, you want to have some fun with this, and you can mask all manner of ills with a really, really good conditioning product. So I would totally agree. Don't get too hung up on, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that, I shouldn't be doing this. Hey, you can always cut it off and start again, and conditioners mask all sorts of ills.
Hey, thank God there is a conditioner, right? Like one of the tips I always give, just like use a conditioner. And then people are looking for all these do-it-yourself treatments as like apple cider vinegar, rice protein water. And then there's just this simple, well, it's not simple, but like this product which you can buy in many stores. And that's like the conditioner which is tested on its safety and on its efficacy. So yeah, well, heads up to the conditioner, I would say, yeah.
Well, I would say yes, damage is a huge deal. And the reason why I say it is, and I think Trevor can definitely appreciate this, because when you have hair fibers that you can't just put any conditioner on it. At least for my hair, I can't just use any conditioner and say, oh, this has solved all my problems. And if I want my hair to look a particular way, then I have to do more than just condition my hair. I need to be able to manage it and manage it in a way. So with curlier hair, it's even more involved to try to decrease breakage. And so when I am trying to style it and making sure that I keep my scalp health intact, and then I'm trying to also make sure that I can elongate the curl so that when I do manipulate it, that I'm not breaking it off. I mean, it's so many things that you have to go through. And so, yes, I think damage is a big deal. And I don't want to cut my hair all off at this time and start all over. So we need to do more.
Okay, another question from Kay, who asks, do you have any advice for consumers choosing among the vast array of products marketed for differentiated hair concerns when you have multiple concerns at once? For example, volume, frizz, texture, deep conditioning, clarifying, repair, etc., for all the claims that are out there. Any tips?
You know, again, most shampoos work kind of the same. Most conditioners work kind of the same. Some people need a lot of conditioning. Some people need a little bit of conditioning. So, you know, sort of, you know, self-assess your own hair. Do I have, you know, long, thick, curly hair that's going to need a lot of conditioning, or do I have fine, thin hair which can't tolerate a lot of conditioning? And then also another point I think to point out here as well is that it's not just about the product; it's how you use the product. So if you use a higher dosage of product, if you leave it in longer, if you don't rinse it as thoroughly, you leave behind more conditioning ingredient behind, and the properties of your hair will be, you know, different than if you did the opposite of that. So you know, don't be afraid to experiment, but also experiment with the way you use the product, not just with the product as well.
Well, I think during my presentation, one of the bullet points that I made was seek the help of a professional. So if you have a multiple like things that's going on in terms of, you know, help that you need, then trying to find a trusted stylist can resolve a lot of issues if you find someone who's competent. So I would not tell anybody to try to tackle that all themselves. It's just too much work. I would rather just have somebody else help out in that process.
And here, maybe like for the conditioner, as that's like one of the products which I think everyone, well, it's just an easy product to use here, that it can just sometimes also be a trial and error actually, because I mean, if someone recommends a conditioner which works on their hair, it might not work for your hair, although they are made for a certain, like if they're made for bleached hair, they're likely to work on bleached hair, but that's just sometimes a trial and error actually. Yeah, just to try different conditioner, which one works for you. And if it doesn't give like immediate smoothness to your hair, well, then probably there's not, yeah, it's not the perfect one for your hair type.
I guess let's be honest, you know, most people use the product they use because they like the fragrance, right? You know, that is such a major driver in which product you use. So, you know, people will tell you that a product works better, even though it's basically the same product. It just has a better fragrance, and that fragrance halos everything and makes everybody think it is better. So let's not forget the importance of fragrance as well.
But if it doesn't detangle your hair, I mean, I think then, well, likely to pass it on because, well, you cannot comb through your hair, or yeah.
Yeah, there has to be a performance, you know, level of entry. It has to meet a certain amount of performance to be acceptable. But once you've done that, I think most people are going to pick the one that smells nice
Yeah.
over one that doesn't.
Okay, and now moving on to the next question. And for everyone in the audience, ask your questions and I will ask the panel. This one comes in from Noga. I'm sorry, I probably mispronounced your name. So they say, you have said that drugstore shampoos are formulated pretty much the same, and we heard a lot about why cheaper surfactants are not inferior. But what about pH? So maybe we can debunk a misconception here. Do drugstore shampoos have optimal pH? Is there an optimal pH? What are your thoughts about looking for a certain pH as a consumer for your hair care? What do you think?
I think a huge red herring. You know, pH can have effects on hair in the extremes. So, you know, as has been mentioned in a number of presentations, if you crank up the pH, the hair fibers will swell. You can get chemical treatments in there more efficiently. But the hair swelling profile is pretty much flat between about pH 3 all the way up to about pH 9. So, you know, in that range, pH really doesn't do anything to change the swelling properties of your hair. Most hair care products tend to be formulated around pH 5 for the simple reason is they use deionized water. And by using deionized water, the deionization process lowers the pH somewhat from the neutral state. So, you know, my experience from working in the industry, that's really why the pH sit. It's because we want to use demineralized water for the, you know, we've heard all about what hard water ions can do to the hair. So we want to use demineralized water, but that demineralization process lowers the pH to about 5.5. So, you know, there's all sorts of theoretical things that people point out, but like I said, the range, the swelling range of hair is very flat between about 3 and 9.
And Trevor, if you now take into account the charge actually, because now you're talking about swelling, but if you talk now about charge related, I mean, then it can make a difference to decrease the pH actually of the shampoo.
Well, the isoelectric point of hair is about 3.8. So, you know, so long as your pH doesn't drop below 3.8, which none of them will, then, you know, there's no issues. So you'd have to have a very unusual product to have a, you know, a pH down below the isoelectric point.
Yeah, and there has been some research that has shown that when you do, the treatments that put your hair in a high pH state, meaning when you color your hair or you relax your hair, or even perm your hair, then oftentimes you do need to decrease that pH. But believe it or not, the dialysis, which is just putting your hair in water and letting, all of the anionic chemical ions seep out, that is a good way to get your hair back to its normal pH. And so that is accepted. And I'm not sure that having a shampoo that is particularly most of them, like you said, Trevor, are low enough, where it's going to have the hair be the way it needs to. So I agree with you, Trevor.
And here it might be like for the consumer that often like shampoos are like labeled as pH neutral. Then it's difficult, like what do they mean with pH neutral? Because like, I think many people perceive pH neutral as pH 7, which you don't want the shampoo to be. So it's difficult, I think, to put something on the pH for the consumer, because it's already creating a lot of misperception about what is meant actually. So I always say, like, in general, they don't. Of course, as a formulator, you will optimize the pH because it will give better results. So it doesn't make sense to go to make a shampoo with pH higher than 7. So, but yeah, it can be difficult for the consumer to guess what the brand means with pH neutral, or yeah.
So I suppose suffice to say, this is probably not something that you need to worry about. There's all these like pH balancing claims that, they just confuse people, because you know what? The pH in your products are balanced. Like, what does that even mean? So probably don't have to stress out about this.
Yeah.
I thought this was an interesting question, and maybe I will direct this first to Crystal, because I know you are doing some work here. So this is from Aaron, who asks, is there any outreach happening to stylists, hair schools, salon educators to minimize the spread of misinformation, or maybe to better inform them about what's going on in the world of hair care? What do you think?
I think that there's definitely not enough movement to educate the stylists. That's something that I have found necessary for those who feel that they want to learn more about science and research, because I am on my soapbox again, saying that I do believe that the best way, the most efficient way to advance not only the push towards debunking all the myths out there, but also a drive towards making sure that we make advancements in science, is to work with the hair practitioners. But the hair practitioners don't have the necessary education that's needed for real impact to be made. Is there a push? Not nearly enough. There is the desire. But
you're working on some cool stuff that feel free to give a shout out to.
Yeah. So I do have the Association of Professional Trichologists, which is a way for practitioners to get information that is based on science and to elevate the industry. And so thank you for that opportunity to talk about that. And it's for all key stakeholders in the industry, not just hair practitioners. It's for those who want to really be a part of getting the right information out.
And where can people find that?
Yes, go to trichology.association.org. trichology.association.org. Thank you.
Helene and Trevor, I don't know. Do you guys want to add anything to this question?
I think a lot of big companies will have people who have the title educators, and they will go out and tell stories to the people in the salon. But really, they tend to be marketing messages, promoting the sort of benefits behind the products that they are trying to sell. Back when I used to have hair, I used to go and get my hair cut across the road from where I was, and the women who worked there, knowing what I did, would bring out all the products that the salespeople had been and told them all about, during the week, and ask me, to debunk what they were saying, kind of thing. So, it's a great idea, but I've heard many times over the years, why don't we educate the customer? Why don't we educate the consumer? But that would be telling the consumer, no, you're wrong. This is the way it is. And you generally don't want to do that because you're trying to sell them a product. So normally a consumer says, okay, I want a moisturizing product. Rather than explaining the science of them, you just say, here you go, here's a moisturizing product. Thank you very much. So that, again, that's sort of the mentality of our industry, for better or for worse.
Helene, do you have anything to add before I move on to the next question?
Well, I find like also your association, Chris, I think very interesting, as there are many actually hair professionals who follow me who always say like, oh, they taught us wrong, or like their education taught us wrong. So I think that's also a nice, maybe like an update which is needed here, because they also don't, I mean, for example, the whole thing about moisture, or there are many things which then now they read, for example, and then they see like, yeah, that was not, I mean, our education system, our books taught us differently. So I think a new an update in there would also be a nice good move forward, actually.
Okay, so I am just going through the questions. We've had a few, and I'm just scrolling up. There was something around, oh, here it is, from Alina, who asks, what would be the possible reason why the root is thinner than the rest of the hair? I don't know anything about this. So, Trevor, what do you think?
That would be unusual. The trouble is with the whole hair growth process is it's all down to the physiology of your body. Your body's physiology is so complicated and can be impacted by so many things. You hear stories of people who went through chemotherapy and all of a sudden they used to grow their hair straight and now the hair grows curly. If that really is the case, and you have, evidence to suspect that that's true, it would seem to be something has changed in the body's physiology. And so,
but is this measured, or is this a guess, or is this really like results, lab results, or? Jen, like from the question, someone really observed, or it was really measured?
They gave me no information. That was the question.
There are stories about people who underdid a rather rapid weight loss kind of thing, and the hair properties really changed and these sorts of things. So it's a very complicated thing, the growth process, and so if that's really the case, I would suspect it's something changing in the body's physiology, but that could be many numbers of things, whether it be diet or whatever.
I don't understand the question. That you're being thinner in the root. I don't understand. So
okay, well then, moving on to the next question. So this is from Tropic Gal Naturals, who asks, how to explain to customers that hair products based on curl types is just marketing. Do you agree with that statement? I have several family members with a range of hair types from straight to coily and many different hair thicknesses and porosities. Are able to use, if not all, the same products and have all the great results. Can we all use the same types of hair products, not including styling, not including damaged hair or dyed hair? If you agree, how would we explain that to customers?
Thanks. Again, you do need different products for different types of hair, but perhaps not for as complex an answer as perhaps the question was. Like I say, if you condition your hair, some hair can tolerate a lot of conditioning, some hair can tolerate only a little bit of conditioning. So you have to use what's right for you. A product for somebody with fine, thin hair is not going to be the same thing as a product for somebody with very thick hair. But to think that you want a product for somebody with very thick hair versus, well, kind of thick hair, then not so much. So the extremes, that there's certainly the need, but I think our industry tends to make things a bit more complicated and tends to chop all that stuff into pigeonholes that are a bit too small.
And I think it also depends upon expectation. So the hair history will dictate the condition of your hair. So what do you use? How often do you use it? What problems do you perceive that you have, if any? And then trying to understand what you're ultimately trying to achieve. Because someone who's trying to achieve a hairstyle that is You want it to stay intact. So if the wind blows, you don't want it to mess up. Then the products that you would use for that scenario is different than if you have a product where you want it free flowing and the body, so you want it to move a particular way. That product or whatever series of products that you use would be different for that particular outcome. So it's all dependent upon expectations. So it's very difficult to answer that without having the whole context of what the consumer wants.
Now, I have quite a few brands who are probably tuning in. And so I wonder if you guys have any suggestions for them as they think about hair care, as they think about product development, their marketing, could even talk to like ingredient suppliers selling to the brands, but any suggestions or insights for brands who are operating in the hair care space?
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one is, I mentioned the litigious world in the US particularly. I mean, there are a lot of small companies that have gone out there and said some quite aggressive things and have ended up being sued. So it's not like big companies sue each other like it used to be. The people who seem to be doing the policing these days are the lawyers. And, we can think of a bunch of examples of people who have get in trouble is perhaps the wrong word. Sometimes, as was mentioned in one of those presentations, that people got in trouble for things that they didn't do anything wrong. But it is a world where the law is becoming more and more litigious, and so whatever you are saying, I think you really, really need to have data to back that up, and have data yourself to back that up. Sometimes you hear these small companies saying, "Well, the vendor told me that this ingredient did that." You need that information yourself. You're putting your hands in that vendor's credibility at that particular point. And if I was launching a product saying all those things, I'd want that data myself for my product, not just because a vendor said it. So be very careful in this litigious environment we're now starting to live in.
Well, what I wanted to say really relates to what Trevor is saying, that also if you talk to a supplier, which will supply you any ingredients, that often they want these fancy new ingredients with a nice name, or which are known from the skin industry. But in the end, for example, ingredients which will be really effective are not always the ingredients with with a trendy name actually. So I would here definitely also ask the supplier, do you have data to support these ingredients? And maybe you want this ingredient in your product, which has this fancy name you can put on the packaging. But sometimes these ingredients which will be very powerful, which have a long name and which you will probably not put on the packaging. So look or ask for the data that they will sell this new ingredient maybe to you, but that's not always the most effective. Or so I would really ask the supplier for, do you have any new data about that new ingredient, and does it work better than another very known conditioning ingredient?
Now, I think the message to indie brands would be a little bit different than the message to the bigger brands. So starting with the bigger brands have a lot of resources. The message that I would say is to think out of the box in terms of, as I said, getting to understand what people with the product in hand are saying, and less about the consumers themselves, but more about the professionals who can have more context of what's going on and may be able to articulate it a little bit better. Sometimes not, but sometimes they are experiencing things. I would say make sure that you don't forget about the stylist, because I've seen a trend where a lot of people are doing it themselves. And so a lot of the larger brands are going directly to the consumer when they are just saying, okay, we need educators to disseminate the information or the message that we want for this particular brand. And like Trevor said, it's basically marketing. So thinking out of the box and to work with stylists to get more information to get that innovation, I think is important. For the indie brands, I'm going to support what Trevor said in terms of, getting data for the finished product. And while a lot of times it can be expensive, there are ways that you can get the data that there are shortcut ways that you can do it in terms of collaborating with other stylists and research scientists such as myself, and let's brainstorm on how we can get that information, for you, because it's very important. And it appeals to the more, what I say, the sophisticated consumer that exists right now. They want to know more.
I think your brand message, it is the identity of the brand. And so if that brand message gets challenged and shut down, that's, I won't say the end of your brand, but it's a huge, so, many years of building a brand can be shut down instantly by just not having the right piece of data here and there. And so, I think making sure you dot your I's and cross all your T's is immensely important.
Yeah, I suppose this is a theme that has come up at all of our conferences, from skincare, safety, sustainability to hair care. If you make a claim on your label, you better be prepared to prove it.
Yep.
The next question I thought was really good, from Aga, who asks how to approach cases in which scientists or professionals have different standpoints. For example, washing hair twice and keeping it lathered for 5 minutes before rinsing. For numerous trichologists, this is religion. As far as I know, Helene is a strong proponent for shampooing the hair once. I will also say something that I recently was exposed to, and Crystal, you blew my mind with this factoid. Stay tuned. We're going to have next week, our podcast is returning, and it's going to launch the season with an episode with Crystal on curly hair. So if you didn't get enough here, then tune into that. But you brought this up because it came up on my social media, this idea about texture. So I had no idea that cosmetologists they had a different definition for what texture means. So when I think of texture, I think about what the dictionary tells me texture means, which is like the coarseness of a material, like how it's different along a material. Okay. And then what they refer to it, which I was very surprised by, is was it's the size, is correct me, thickness. So I just didn't expect that, because that is not in the dictionary. So anyhow, I'll leave my question there. What do you think?
So wait, I don't know if I followed the question.
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
We have a question again, yeah.
I ended on this, this, I think this, and then these other people think this. But the question was, to bring it back, how to approach cases in which scientists and professionals have different standpoints.
Wow. That happens a lot. And what I always say is, people share information based on their vantage points and their experiences. And so when you do experimental design, for an example, you are looking at the experimental design from the vantage point in which you know, and what your knowledge is, what your experience is, what people have told you, and you move forward in that direction. And so it's always good to put things into context in terms of understanding why the experimental design was done the way that it was, and because of course that is going to affect your output. So not to say that things are wrong, but for the particular design or the setup, the output is the output, and that could be what the scientist is articulating in terms of what the results are. It may not include, like, for example, Trevor, I will use your example. When you were saying that looking at moisture in hair, and when you ask consumers to give their perspective of hair that was at a higher humidity, what the feel was compared to a lower humidity, they always said that the higher humidity hair swatches felt worse. Well, I'd be willing to bet you that if you had curlier hair swatches and you asked maybe a different consumer, that your results may have been different. So it's not saying that what you experienced was wrong. It's saying that under those circumstances, those are the results that you got. So we have to put into context before we start saying, oh, that scientist said one thing and that was wrong because another one refuted them. I think we all need to understand where things come from before we make those assumptions.
Yeah, I think go to a technical hair conference and you will hear plenty of debates about things. People don't understand everything. There's still lots of stuff we don't know. We've heard talk today about why hair has its natural shape. A good bunch of people believe it's the hair grown out of a follicle. A good bunch of people believe that it's down to a bilateral structure of the internal cortex. These are the sort of debates that break out in conferences. So, science is an evolving subject. As we generate more data, our knowledge changes. But, as Crystal said, it is right. Different things can hold for different hair types. And everybody has opinions. So, we live in a day and age where lots of people go online, post opinions and things which, perhaps are not the most informed ones. But it's up to people to sort of decide those. And, some people have an agenda. If you've been told something by somebody who works for a company, chances are they're trying to sell you their product as well. So, yeah, there's lots of opinions out there, obviously.
And well, maybe to help the person who asked the question here. So because the problem here is, right, it's something you heard from your hairdresser or hair professional, and then you now hear something else from a scientist. What can you do, right? I mean, that was also I think the main point of the question. Well, then if you can always try both options, then I would say, and see which one works better for you. If you think okay, well, my hair professional says it, and now I'm reading that it's from a science-based perspective, it works like that, then I would say, well, try both then for you, and then see what works best for you.
Demand evidence.
Sorry?
Demand evidence.
Amen. I agree with that. And I just want to say that I got confused, and thank you for repeating the question, but I did want to clarify when we were talking about hair texture in the cosmetology textbooks. When you look up texture, it's referring to the hair thickness, but consumers have redefined texture and that is the umbrella term to incorporate curly hair, coily hair, wavy hair, so that is now the definition of texture. So
Okay, so now we are coming towards the end of the panel, and I will just ask one more question, which is, do you have any final take-homes that you'd want to leave our audience with? And or is there any pieces of information that we haven't had a chance to cover that you want to get out there? Helene, do you want to start this one?
Well, this is for the consumer perspective. I would say here, well, that's always most of my posts, I always end with, treat your hair well, don't over damage it already by, for example, over brushing, or be nice to your hair. Actually, I mean, you can already do so much by trying not to damage it. And there are so many nice products out there as well, like nice conditioner, shampoos, and bond repair products, instead of all the do-it-yourselves, which are not even tested for safety and for efficacy. So yeah, those are always the simple tips I give, actually.
Trevor, would you like
I
to go
can go.
next? Oh, sorry, Crystal, you go.
That's okay. I would say that one thing that I would like to get more information on is hair loss. Since I said in my presentation that Winnie Awa had a point of saying that, or discovering that there's 100% increase in people looking up information pertaining to hair loss. So that is a huge topic to cover. And there is not as much information out there as we need, but that is something we definitely need to study more and get more information out to both professionals and consumers. So if I had to pick a topic, that would be one.
And last but not least,
I guess at the expense of sounding like a broken record, I would again say, be skeptical, demand evidence, question everything. why do you think that a shampoo should repair your chipped, cracked, and uplifted cuticle? You know, show me some evidence for that, and you know, recognize that a lot of a lot of the things that are on the bottle or on the advertising, somebody trying to convince you to buy that product. So you know, they're going to tell you all sorts of wonderful things, but you know, question it, think it through, and demand evidence. So.
I must say that that might be challenging though for the consumer. If I mean, we cannot know everything about any expertise, and I would, yeah. So I think that's, yeah, that's quite challenging for the consumer to indeed not believe everything. Well, it's not very really much your expertise, but I mean, it's something we indeed should do. Also, like, why those free from claims? Indeed, should you believe them or not? Like, why are they? But it's I think it's very yeah, that's a difficult task, but it's necessary, but it's difficult for the consumer. Yeah.
Yeah, again, you know, we are in the information age, and there's an awful lot of information out there. So, you know, it can be found, but it's also a bit of a minefield out there as well. So, your point.
And there's a difference also between that there is information out there, but that you should also know the context. I mean, there are also many studies you can find, which will say indeed something about an ingredient, but if you don't take into account the context, then yeah.
Well, that concludes the Hair Summit. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists here for agreeing to be a part of this panel and closing the day. Thank you to our speakers all throughout the day for donating your time and expertise. Obviously, this event would not be possible without you sharing. Thank you to Julia Ruby, who is based in Australia, stayed up all night because it's in the middle of the night for her to manage our Discord, because I can't do everything. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And also for setting up the Discord for us. Be sure to follow her on social media at Ruby's Resource. Yes, there will be a replay. You will get a link to your inbox tomorrow. And I also recorded this panel, so that will also be separate in the replay this time. Massive thank you to our sponsors. It's because of you that we were able to keep this event free for anyone to attend. This is something that I'm really passionate about because as a young professional, I went to a lot of conferences that were very expensive for me to attend. Now, I know Trevor does a lot of work on this for making accessible hair care conferences. So look into the work that he does for hair care. This was my only one, probably one and only ever conference on hair care. I'll probably move on. So if you want more, then these are the people to go and look to for more information. And Helene is so active on Instagram, lots of information there. And as mentioned, Crystal's doing a lot of advocacy, connecting the dots between I mean, you guys all are, but through the work that she shared, but also through TRI Institute with Trevor, and yeah, at Science Meets Cosmetics with Helene. Anyhow, thank you to our sponsors. Just a shout out again to our silver sponsors, who were Pantene and Geltor, our bronze sponsors, who were Clariant and Inolex, and our general sponsor, K18. Thank you. Thank you to our attendees for signing up and spending 8 hours with us today. So you're obviously very into hair care, and I so appreciate all the engagement in the Discord, which is where the panel or the whole all the presentations happened. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Oh, actually, I do have one more note. We have another conference planned. The next one is going to be at the start of December. And it's going to be So You Want to Start a Beauty Brand, diving into all the need to knows for prospective beauty brands that you'll have to know to do it right. From working with contract manufacturers, formulation development, regulation, legal, marketing. So stay tuned. I'll be announcing more details soon, and I will leave it there. Thank you so much again for attending the Hair Science eSummit.